The mansion smelled like dust and memory, faintly of old books and cedar wood. Every step I took echoed through the marble halls like the house itself was listening. Grandpa's portrait hung above the fireplace, his eyes painted kind but commanding. I remember how those same eyes once softened when he called me his little musician. Now, under the flickering chandelier, they seemed to be watching me for real. I set my bag down by the door and whispered into the emptiness. "Grandpa, I'm home." That's when I heard it, a faint creak from upstairs. My heart kicked hard against my ribs. I froze. Then again, the sound of footsteps. I grabbed the nearest thing I could find, a brass candlestick from the entry table, and crept toward the staircase. The old wood groaned beneath my feet. The house had always creaked, but this was different. This was someone moving. Halfway up, I caught a shadow slip past the balcony rail. "Who's there?" I demanded. My voice shook, but I kept climbing. A tall man appeared at the top of the stairs, wearing a black coat and carrying a folder. He lifted his hand slowly, palms out. "Miss Carter? Please don't hit me," I blinked. "Who are you?" He smiled faintly, setting the folder down on the railing. "I'm Daniel Reed, your grandfather's personal estate manager. He left me in charge of helping you transition into ownership." I lowered the candlestick, breath shaky. "You couldn't have maybe called first before sneaking around the mansion?" He chuckled softly. "I did 3 times. No answer. I glanced at my phone. Dead battery. Perfect." Daniel's tone softened. "Henry Carter thought of everything, Miss Carter. He wanted to make sure you were safe, and that his legacy was properly handed down." I followed him into the study, the one lined with floor-to-ceiling books. The smell of leather and whiskey still lingered, as if Grandpa had just left. Daniel set the folder on the desk and slid it toward me. Inside were pages of instructions, bank access codes, property deeds, and a sealed envelope labeled in my grandfather's handwriting. "To my granddaughter, Chloe, when the world turns against you." My throat tightened as I opened it. Inside was a short letter. "My dearest Chloe, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone, and the wolves have already begun to circle. You will be tested not by strangers but by blood. Remember what I taught you. Wealth reveals character more than it changes it. Stand firm, trust your instincts, and trust Daniel. He knows the truth." "Grandpa Henry." I looked up at Daniel. "What truth?" He hesitated, then walked to the window, looking out over the dark gardens. "Your grandfather's death wasn't an accident." The words hit like ice water. "What are you talking about?" I whispered. He turned, his eyes shadowed. "Henry Carter's car didn't just collide with a drunk driver. The other vehicle belonged to a shell company owned by your father's firm. The reports were buried before they reached the public. Someone paid to keep it quiet." I staggered back. "You think my father—" "I don't think," Daniel interrupted quietly. "I know." I pressed a trembling hand to my mouth. "No, he wouldn't. He couldn't." Daniel met my eyes steadily. "Your grandfather left evidence, proof. That's why he left everything to you, not them. Because he knew they'd destroy each other fighting over money. And now that you have the inheritance, you're in danger too." My stomach twisted. The mansion suddenly felt colder, darker, like every window was a target. "So what do I do?" I asked, voice barely a whisper. Daniel slid another folder toward me. Inside were documents, keys, and a small USB drive labeled Project Clementine. "Start here," he said. "And whatever you do, don't tell your parents I'm here." Lightning flashed outside, and for a split second, the reflection in the glass wasn't just ours. A car sat idling at the end of the driveway, headlights on, watching. Daniel's jaw tightened. "They're already here." Camera pans to the glowing headlights in the storm. Fade out. 6 weeks ago, I was just an ordinary piano teacher, barely making rent on a tiny apartment that smelled faintly of old sheet music and coffee. My life was simple, humble, quiet, until a single phone call shattered everything I thought I knew. It was just past midnight when my phone rang. The voice on the other end was trembling, formal, an officer. My grandfather, Henry Carter, the man the world called a billionaire tycoon, but to me was just Grandpa. Had been in a terrible accident. He didn't make it. The words didn't register at first. My pen fell from my hand, ink bleeding across the practice sheets I'd been grading. Henry Carter wasn't supposed to die. He was supposed to call me tomorrow and remind me to eat breakfast. He was supposed to see my students' recital next month. He wasn't supposed to be gone. The funeral came and went in a blur of black suits and empty condolences. My parents, Richard and Diane Carter, turned it into a spectacle of power. My father's jaw was locked in calculation. He was already thinking in numbers, stocks, and inheritance shares. My mother posed for sympathy, crying just enough for the photographers. And my brother Ethan? He leaned against a marble column, scrolling on his phone, muttering, "I'll be fine once we know what we're getting." No one cried for the man. They only mourned the money. I stood by the casket, staring at my grandfather's peaceful face, whispering, "I'll make you proud, Grandpa. I promise." 2 weeks later, the lawyer called. "Chloe," he said, voice calm but deliberate, "your grandfather's will is ready to be read. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., he specifically requested you be there, with your family." I didn't know it yet, but that meeting would change everything. Scene: the will reading. The law office was an old Victorian mansion turned professional suite. Heavy wood furniture, brass fixtures, and the faint smell of leather and coffee. My palms were slick with sweat as I entered. Michael Turner, my grandfather's attorney, greeted me with a solemn nod. "Your grandfather spoke of you often, Chloe." Before I could reply, the door opened and my parents swept in, all polished smiles and tension. Olivia followed last, clicking her heels, phone in hand. Michael cleared his throat, placing a leather folder on the table. "Let's begin." He read through formalities, trusts and business clauses, until the air grew thick enough to choke on. Then, with a deep breath, he turned a page. "To my granddaughter, Chloe Carter," he read slowly, "I leave the entirety of my estate and holdings, a sum totaling $7 billion. Silence. Then chaos. My father's chair screeched backward. "This is absurd." "That money belongs to the family, to us." My mother's voice trembled with rage. "She's a teacher, Michael. She can't handle that kind of responsibility." Ethan slammed his fist on the table. "She didn't even run a company. What did she ever do to deserve it?" I felt every pair of eyes burning into me, but my voice stayed steady. "No," I said simply. "Grandpa trusted me. I won't give it up." That one word, "no," changed everything. That night, my parents threw me out of the house. My phone was flooded with threats, insults, guilt trips. I packed my few belongings into my car and drove toward my grandfather's mansion, the only place that ever felt like home. When I unlocked the gate at dawn, the estate looked cold and enormous, the kind of silence that hums in your bones. I thought I was alone. I wasn't. Inside the mansion, the lights were already on, and someone was waiting. Camera pans slowly up the marble staircase. A shadow moves at the top landing. Fade out. Chloe, V.O. The headlights outside cut through the storm like two watchful eyes. Daniel moved fast. Lights off, curtains drawn. The mansion sank into shadow. "What do they want?" I whispered. He glanced out the window again. "If your father's behind this, they're here for that drive. Once you open it, you'll understand why." He handed me a small black laptop, older, offline. "This one isn't connected to Wi-Fi. Safer that way." I sat at the desk, plugged in the USB labeled Project Clementine, and waited as the screen flickered to life. A single folder appeared. Confidential. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were dozens of files, legal documents, emails, financial records. Daniel leaned over my shoulder. "These are your grandfather's private investigations," he murmured. He was digging into something huge. The first document made my blood run cold. It was a transfer sheet. $25 million moved from Carter Holdings into a hidden offshore account under my father's name. I scrolled further. More accounts, more names, my mother, my brother, even a senator. Each file was dated and marked unauthorized. "He was building a case," Daniel said quietly. "Against your father, against the company. He planned to go public, the night he died." My mouth went dry. You're saying he was killed to stop him? Daniel nodded. And now that you inherited everything, you've inherited the evidence too. A chill spread through me. My parents' faces from the funeral flashed in my mind. Dry eyes, greedy smiles, no grief. I whispered, "They're going to come for me." Daniel's jaw tightened. "That's why we have to move fast. There's one more file. Open the video." The screen went black for a moment, then flickered. My grandfather's face appeared, older, tired, but still with that spark I remembered. "If you're seeing this, my darling Chloe," he said softly, "it means I didn't make it. The people I trusted most have betrayed me, and you may already be in danger. You have to finish what I started. Don't trust anyone in this family, not even your brother. Daniel will guide you, but the decision must be yours. The truth will destroy everything, but it will set you free." My hand covered my mouth as tears welled up. "Grandpa," Daniel placed a hand on my shoulder. "We'll make him proud. But you need to understand, once we expose this, your life will never be the same." Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered without thinking. "Chloe," my mother's voice, too calm, too sweet. "We know you're at the mansion. We just want to talk." I froze. Daniel mouthed, "Hang up." But before I could, her tone changed. Low, sharp. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be, sweetheart. You're not safe there." Then the line went dead. Daniel grabbed his coat. "They've traced you? We have to go. Now." I stuffed the USB into my pocket and followed him toward the back door. But as he reached for the handle, a voice echoed from the front hall. "Well, well, looks like our new billionaire is already packing." I turned, and there stood my brother. Ethan, dripping wet from the rain, a cruel smirk twisting his face. Behind him, 2 men in black suits stepped forward. Ethan tilted his head. "Dad says that money belongs to us. Hand over the drive, Chloe, or I'll take it myself." Lightning flashes. Chloe's hand grips the drive tight. Daniel steps in front of her, KHLOE, In that moment, I realized something Grandpa once said. "Money doesn't change people, Chloe. It unmasks them." And I was about to see just how monstrous my family truly was. Fade out as thunder crashes. Screen goes black with soft music. KHLOE. Ethan's smile froze me where I stood. The little brother who used to steal cookies from Grandpa's kitchen now stood in front of me with hired thugs and eyes that burned with greed. Daniel stepped forward, his tone like steel. "Ethan, this isn't the way. Walk out of here before you make a mistake you can't undo." Ethan chuckled darkly. "Oh, it's already done. You really thought you could keep that drive to yourself, Chloe? Dad knows you found it. He knows about the accounts, the video, all of it." My heart pounded so loud I could barely hear the rain. "You broke into Grandpa's files," I whispered. "You killed him, didn't you?" His expression flickered, just for a second, enough to confirm what I already knew. Ethan's voice hardened. "He was going to ruin us. Our family. You think you deserve billions because you can play the piano. He built this empire and Dad kept it alive. You're nothing." Daniel moved between us. "She's not giving you anything." The moment stretched, silent, suffocating, before Ethan snapped his fingers. The 2 men lunged forward. Daniel swung first, catching one across the jaw. The other grabbed my arm, twisting, but I kicked free, my breath coming in gasps. The drive. It slipped from my pocket, clattering across the marble floor. Ethan's eyes darted to it. "Grab it!" I dove, fingers scraping against the smooth surface, just as Daniel tackled one of the men away. My hand closed around the USB, and without thinking, I bolted toward the grand staircase. Ethan shouted behind me. "Chloe!" My heart raced as I ran up the stairs, the thunder outside almost drowning his footsteps. I turned into Grandpa's study, the room that smelled of leather, books, and faint traces of his cologne. I locked the door. My hands shook as I reached for the old landline on the desk. There was only one person I could trust now, Michael Turner, Grandpa's lawyer. The line connected after 2 rings. "Michael, it's Chloe." But before I could finish, the door burst open. Ethan stood there, rain-soaked, fury twisting his face. You should have stayed out of this, he lunged. I stumbled back, hitting the desk. The USB slipped again, landing near the window. Lightning flashed. Ethan reached for it, but I grabbed the lamp and swung. The glass shattered against his shoulder. He roared, stumbling. For a moment, we both froze, panting, staring at each other. You think Grandpa loved you more? He hissed. He just pitied you. I swallowed hard. Maybe. But at least I never betrayed him. Before he could move again, a sharp voice echoed from behind him. Step away from her. Ethan. Daniel stood in the doorway, bruised but unbroken, his gun drawn. It's over. Ethan's jaw clenched. He looked between us, then at the USB lying just inches away. For 1/10 second I thought he'd fight again, but then, with a growl of defeat, he backed away. Police sirens wailed in the distance, faint but growing louder. Daniel lowered his weapon slightly. Michael called them, he said softly. It's done. Ethan's face crumpled with rage. You'll regret this, he spat, as officers stormed in moments later, handcuffing him and his men. I stood frozen by the desk, the USB still in my hand. Rain streaking down the windows like tears. Paulo Vio. They took my brother away. My parents were arrested the next morning. The files Grandpa left behind exposed everything. Fraud, embezzlement, even bribery that spanned decades. For weeks, reporters camped outside the gates. Headlines screamed, Carter Empire crumbles. But in that silence after the storm, I finally understood what Grandpa meant. Money doesn't define you. What you do with it does. I donated half of my inheritance to music schools and charities in his name. The rest I used to build something new, a foundation for children who, like me, were told they'd never be enough. Every evening, I sit by Grandpa's grand piano. The same seat where he taught me that music comes from the heart, not from wealth. I placed the USB on the piano lid. Scratched. Dented but still whole, it's a reminder that truth, no matter how painful, is the most valuable inheritance of all. Soft piano fades out. Lightning flashes one last time. Screen goes black.